Welcome to Preemptive Focus. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Today, we're talking about marijuana and the municipalities. It's coming to a neighborhood near you. Maybe. Interestingly enough, 8 cities in Canada currently do want to decline the ability to have a dispensary of marijuana because as of October 17th, marijuana and cannabis is legal in Canada. So here it is. 6 of the cities are in British Columbia. British Columbia probably grows the best pot in Canada, and 6 of those cities, that includes Vancouver Island and Whistler, of all places, do not want to have a dispensary. They don't want to be able to sell marijuana in their communities. Also, you have Richmond Hill, population of 195,000. Markham, they don't want it. Toronto says they will address it. They do believe that it's part of it. Mississauga, the current mayor Bonnie Crombie, has stated that she was in favor when the Liberals were going to put the dispensaries overseen by the LCBO or by a Shoppers Drug Mart, but now she's not quite sure and still open for discussion. And the mayor of Oakville, who's running for re-election, says that he will stand on being re-elected, that he will not bring dispensaries to his community. In 2019, they're going to open dispensaries, so you will be able to have it in your community. But up until that, it's all going to be ordered online through Canada Post. Interesting circumstance. We're going to talk a little bit more about municipalities. We're going to talk about the financial implications. Joining me today is the president of Preemptive Focus, Mr. Don McLeod. Don, welcome. You've dabbled in politics, you're in community media, you've had the opportunity to speak to so many people who are running in politics right now, trying to become either the mayor or a councillor. How important is this issue of having a dispensary in your community, and how are they using it to politicize either their election or their opponent's unelectability?
Well, we've asked the candidates whether they would, whether to become mayor or councillor, city councillor, regional councillor, whether they would vote for having dispensaries in the community. This is an important issue because there's a lot of money involved, obviously, and it's big coin. We'll get into that later. But we've asked everyone whether they would opt in or out. At this point in time, we haven't got a clear answer from anybody. We've also contacted the Peel District School Board, we contacted the city, we contacted the Peel Regional Police to find out if they have any standards in place for the use of it by their employees. So we didn't get an answer back from anyone, which tells me...
Would you not think, though, Don, that they're all a little bit afraid? This is such a burgeoning topic. There's so much gray area. I think policy will come about once it's actually introduced, but you don't want to be the first one to the table, do you?
Well, you could be the first one to the table and set the standard, or you could be following. So it's not like they didn't know this was coming down the pipeline. This has been a year in the making. If I'm sitting there and I want to have policy for my employees, whether they be in the public sector or in the private sector, I should be taking a proactive view. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, Metropolitan Toronto Police released a statement that police officers can indulge in marijuana as long as it's not 28 days before they're going to serve.
I don't know how they're going to enforce that, but that's a challenge.
When you talk about machinery, when you talk about certain other workplace aspects, there is policy slowly coming out. What some people are afraid of is that they believe if a dispensary is put in their community or around their community, that it's going to invoke negative people and be a breeder of crime. And the alternative is that if you don't take advantage of a dispensary within your community, the market will go somewhere else and your community will lose the financial fund. The horse is out of the barn. It's legal now.
Oh, absolutely. It's out of the barn.
So how do you mitigate those two sides?
Well, put it this way. Let's talk about municipal funding, because that's a big one coming down the pipeline. So the provincial government has come out with this policy statement. Basically, it's their municipal government's Ontario Recreational Cannabis Framework. They came out with that. They will honor its commitment to provide municipal governments with $40 million of Ontario portion of the federal excise tax on cannabis, with a 50-50 provincial municipal split if Ontario's revenues exceed $100 million in the first 2 years.
So $40 million, is that across the board split up by as many municipalities?
On municipalities that opt in.
Okay.
They have to opt in to get that part of that $40
by
million.
January, isn't it January
22nd
okay.
of 2019.
And if they opt in?
If they opt in, then they're in. But
if they opt out, they don't get a piece of the pie.
They don't get a piece of the pie. But it's a situation where The municipalities have a one-time opportunity to opt out of the cannabis retail. Okay, so they have a one-time opportunity to opt out of it. And if they opt out, they can actually, there's no time period for them to opt back in. But if they opt out is reversed by a municipal government, that decision is final. They don't get another chance. And the reason for that is because if I'm an owner, a storefront owner, or someone who wants to actually put a dispensary in a town, I'm putting a lot of money into these things. I mean, we're talking about spectrometers for the buds to make sure there's no mold in them. We're talking about high security for these things. Mad Men is one of the biggest retailers in the United States. And if you go into any of their shops, I mean, it's high security. You can't have
this is not just like, this isn't just someone throwing up a desk and saying, I'm going to sell pot.
No, these are very secure, and they're high end.
There's expectation, quality, security,
absolutely, 100%.
And tracking too.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
But when you talk to a mom who says, I think we have a misconception about the consumption of marijuana to a certain extent, and people have become more aware of the fact that the medicinal purposes of it is much greater than the let's get buzzed kind of scenario.
Yeah, I mean,
but they're afraid of the quality of person that they say would frequent that area in their neighborhood. Is that a valid concern?
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been ordering cannabis online for like 10, 12 years. I mean, I know people that have been ordering cannabis online for 10, 12 years. They get it delivered by Canada Post within 3 business days, right? The OCS website is up and running. I went into it, I checked it out. All you have to put is your date of birth and your month and your day. There is no, you don't have to put in any kind of, there's no validation on that. So it's just you go in, I put my date and boom, I'm ready to go.
Canada Post has said that they will take deliveries, but when they come to the door, a person of age has to show proof of identification
so
to
I can
accept
order it online and get my buddy to be at the door, right? So
yes.
You know,
Canada Post says they deliver dried flowers, oils, and pre-rolled joints, and well, that's what they're calling it, and seeds that will be for sale on day number 1, according to the website. So, for all intents and purposes, we won't have any retail locations until April 2019.
It'll be, and that
but
gives us
it will
time.
all be Canada Post.
Right, and that gives the municipalities.
So the Postie is your drug dealer.
Well, they already are, to tell you the truth, right? But that gives the municipalities time to set up a framework for their, distance from the schools, how far they can be, how many storefronts they want to have. The owners get their storefront set up and everything else. So by that time, you would think that they're already set up and ready to go.
So right? when you talk about the competition of having to do, I mean, this is a big money maker for the municipalities. How much money are we talking? I mean, there was a statistic. It was $8.7 billion. That there's $22 billion just in ancillary products. Pipes and ironically, did you know that there's cannabis tours now? So they call it the Canada Kush Tour. And do you remember Rick Campanelli used to Entertainment Tonight? That used to be for MTV. So he will be the host of the 2018 Canadian Cannabis Awards, recognizing excellence in Canadian cannabis. The sectors, you ready for this? Top grinder, top pipe, top bong, best rolling papers.
Well, I mean, it's a huge market and it's only going to get bigger, and everybody knows that because of the California and everything else. So, there's 2 different types of marijuana as well. I mean, CBDs are basically, there's no psychoactive properties in that. It's used basically for medical marijuana.
Right.
THC is it has psychoactive properties into it. So you have difference as well, the cola, the pistol, type of marijuana, which is totally different from one to the other. I mean, something like this, I mean, you showed that the last episode or the episode before.
I said, here's a pen, and that is also a pen.
There's no difference.
How many shots are in that?
You can buy this online for $35. It'll give you 150 hits. Right?
Is it self-contained or can you recharge
It's self-contained. They have different ones now where you can actually buy a little bit more. I think it's $65. You take that off and you can put a new one on. So these they're not sold anywhere but the illegal drug trade. But I'm going to tell you something. If you have a kid at school,
smells nothing, see
there's no
nothing.
smell. It's instant vaporizer. It's heated up and it instantly vaporizes. You won't be able to smell it. Some of the stuff you can get now has strawberry or different smells, cherry and stuff. So if I'm an employer and I'm looking at that, or if I have a kid at school who's using this, there is no way to test whether that is nicotine.
So what's your biggest concern, Don? Tell me, you're a social activist. You're involved in media. I mean, you've been involved in politics. What are you afraid of? Is there something that you're afraid of that our community and our society is going to experience with all this?
Well, I'm sure you're going to get the feedback that, it's a gateway drug to hell. I mean, that's basically,
well, if I may say, they also said just because we have the LCBO doesn't mean that they're condoning alcoholism. Just because we have casinos doesn't mean there is some personal responsibility in consumption. But
and the thing is that medical marijuana is something that basically has lost that taboo. And I know a lot of people actually use medical marijuana, the CBD, and it makes them more functional in society.
It improves their life. I mean, I know people as well. It is fundamentally changed. They don't get buzzed at all. It's not about getting high. It has fundamentally changed their quality of life.
Right, and the stigma against that is something. The other thing that we have to talk about is, we're talking about
got a minute left.
Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or talked about the police force and everything else. I'm going to tell you something. The police force, as far as I can see, are totally inadequate. They are not prepared for this rollout. Most of the police chiefs basically are not ready. The drug test, the Draeger drug test 5000, I don't think any police force has bought that.
There is not a definitive line, and how they will prosecute that will be a whole other thing.
They're talking about $6,000 per unit for each police cruiser for one of these devices. So that's a lot of money. And then the other thing is, at this point in time, I know Peel has confirmed that they're holding off on ordering any devices. What they're doing is they're using sobriety tests.
Yeah.
So it's walk the line and stuff
No, it's your
like that,
pupils.
right?
It's a dilation of your pupils.
Well, there's several things.
It's a culmination
they're doing
tests.
that. But, one of the things that the defense lawyers, they're just chomping at the bit because of this device. It's a saliva test, right? And a lot of the police forces were concerned about, how it's going to react in the cold winters up in Canada, because it hasn't been tested under these conditions. And that's the other thing.
You bring up saliva tests when you talk about the latency of the drug within your body constitution. It sits in your fat cells.
Oh, yeah.
It can sit there for 3 or 4 months. And one of the things that they're having a struggle with now is the 15,000 university students, because now that it's legal, I mean, they said you can't consume it on university premises and all the rest of it, the same restrictions as smoking cigarettes. But the latency within the body, how does that put a Canadian university student who's competing in an international event in a drug test?
Well, it's not only that, but the thing is, going back to the employees, we're talking about, it's important to have the municipalities. I know they have to negotiate with CUPE. I know the Peel Police has to talk to its membership and the Peel Police Association. But like I said before, this is not like it's something that just popped out of the can. It's been going in for about a year. So there's a lot of challenges at not only the municipalities, but those who are running are going to have to make a decision on whether they want dispensaries in this town or not. Whether they want to partake of that big pie that the provincial government is dangling. So there's a lot of questions. There's more questions than there is answers at this point.
January 22nd, whether they opt in or out, and October 17th, 5 days before the municipal election, is when marijuana is legalized. Thank you to Don McLeod, president of Brampton Focus, and also Fazil Khan, and all the people who work with us at Brampton Focus to bring this important issue to you. We encourage you to check online. We're doing another program with the insurance company. And, there's all kinds of implications for you as an employer, the risk with marijuana. A very interesting discussion with Corey Evans. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you again soon.